Shannon Sharpe went off on the discourse between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson after the Bills' divisional round losses. It is a hot topic right now, and he was really upset about it.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, and thanks to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage, and on today's show, we're going to be starting off by talking about Shannon Sharpe going off on the discourse between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, and that's been a very hot topic. We even talked about a little bit on yesterday's bonus episode, so we're going to dive into what Shannon had to say about that. We'll also talk about the Ravens head coaching search, getting a bit complicated after the divisional round. Not anything super crazy, but it is interesting the spot the Ravens are in right now, but I don't think it'll have too much impact. We'll dive into that. And finally, we'll talk about Baltimore's weaknesses being exposed this postseason as they have gotten even more glaring after watching what some of these teams have done over the course of the last handful of games here. First, before we get into everything, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode every game day during the NFL playoffs. FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's talk about this now. The Bills lost to the Broncos in the divisional round. It was an overtime game. The NFL playoffs have been crazy, by the way. But the Bills lost. And a lot of people thought that with no Patrick Mahomes, no Lamar Jackson, no Joe Burrow, et cetera, and a pretty wide open AFC, this felt like the Bills' best shot to finally get over the hump. They've made a couple of AFC championship games, haven't been able to get past Patrick Mahomes, but they didn't. They lost to Bo Nix in Denver. And with that came Josh Allen having 4 turnovers, a couple of really bad plays from Josh. And by the way, not just the turnovers, but he also missed a wide open Dawson Knox for the game-winning touchdown that would have prevented the game from going to overtime in the first place. And of course, naturally the response would be, okay, well, Josh Allen's going to catch a lot of flack. And certainly he did. But nationally, it felt like he was not catching the same flack that his counterparts, particularly Lamar Jackson, have caught, where, a lot of people were blaming the referees for that controversial Brandon Cooks play, penalties, the pass interference plays at the end of the game, and attention kind of shifting away from Josh Allen. And, the NFL themselves even put out tweets about Josh Allen and, his situation, which, again, it's been really weird, like the past couple of years. And this is nothing against Josh Allen, by the way. Again, I have a ton of respect for Josh, and I think he's an awesome quarterback. He's really fun to watch. This isn't about Josh. It's just about how different star quarterbacks get treated within the media. And, I've always pushed back on that. I think, stay on one side or the other for all these guys, right? When things happen that are their fault, blame them for it. When things happen that are not their fault, don't blame them for it. There's always going to be a certain level of discourse when you're a star quarterback. But again, like we saw the arm punt thing from, I think that was CBS, if I'm not mistaken, last year. And this year with the NFL, their official account, they put out a tweet that was gotta feel for Josh Allen, right? Gotta feel for Josh Allen. And, ESPN kind of did the same thing, I think, where they also put out a graphic of Josh and, all this stuff about Josh. But then CJ Stroud had a terrible day against the Patriots yesterday, and it was a rough day at the office for CJ Stroud, where there was no rough day at the office graphic for Josh Allen. Instead, it was, ESPN putting out, feel like I let my teammates down and all this and the other. And again, like I thought it was honestly, cool that Josh Allen showed emotion after the game and, was like, you could really see how he was feeling, but that would not have been the same response. Like it got a very positive response. We can be honest about it. Lamar wouldn't have gotten that response. And I don't necessarily like making things about Lamar when it comes to this type of stuff, but people immediately kind of did. And my thing was like, yes, you got to keep the same energy for Josh Allen that you have for Lamar Jackson. And so Shannon Sharpe and Chad Johnson, they do the nightcap show. And I guess there are people in their chat talking about, not keeping the same energy for Lamar and whatnot. And, Shannon Sharpe went off on this and responded to it and was upset about it and kind of defended the fact that Lamar's played poorly. It was a weird conversation. So essentially what Shannon Sharpe said here, he said, quote, Josh Allen played bad and this loss has to be pinned on him. Y'all remember when Lamar Jackson won the MVP that year? How many turnovers did he have against Tennessee? How many turnovers did Lamar have versus Kansas City? What you do is every time Lamar plays bad, you blame somebody else. When Josh Allen plays bad, it's all Josh. You blame Zay Flowers. You blame Mark Andrews. What about those turnovers Lamar had? Look, I've never said Lamar's been the perfect playoff quarterback because it's not true. Again, I am all for just criticism. We can say about Josh in the game that he played on Saturday against the Broncos, he had some terrible plays. He also had some great plays. His teammates also did let him down. And that's the exact thing we should be saying about Lamar Jackson, but more often than not, it all somehow finds its way back to Lamar. Remember when Mark Andrews dropped the 2-point conversion? You remember the discourse that happened over the course of the next couple of weeks about how people started blaming Lamar. National people started blaming Lamar for the throw that was practically right there for Mark. It was not a bad throw. And people were saying, well, yeah, that ball could be a little higher and whatnot. And, it's not just the Josh thing. This happens with the other star quarterbacks as well. I mean, we've talked about it with Joe Burrow and he's more injury prone than Lamar is, but Lamar gets the bad rep for being injured. It's not just the Josh thing. It's just, I want all the star quarterbacks to be treated the same. And I get it. Look, MVPs, right? You make that argument. MVPs. But guess what? Josh Allen has an MVP now. Josh Allen has an MVP. So you can't say, oh, well, Lamar has MVPs and Josh doesn't. No, you can't say that. So I think that these guys, they understand the standards they're being held to. Josh took accountability for the game. And I thought that was cool that he did that. Lamar takes accountability for the game. I think that's cool. But Shannon is essentially saying it's never about Lamar. It's never about Lamar. I mean, it is. Lamar's had some bad plays in the playoffs. I've talked about him on here. I don't think that's the point people are trying to make. It's yes, I can easily come on here and admit that Lamar hasn't been at his best in the postseason for the most part. Now, he's had great games in the postseason. I don't want to wash those away. But, also in some of the biggest moments of his career, he has made some bad plays, just like Josh has, right? It's a two-way street. And, Lamar has more turnovers than Josh in the playoffs. I understand all of those facts, but it's not about that in this moment, especially with what Shannon is trying to say here. Shannon's essentially saying, I guess he was referring to Ravens fans, and he was saying, oh, well, all you guys do is when Lamar does something, it's not on Lamar. No, it's not true. But the problem is too often we are having to have discussions about a play that clearly wasn't Lamar's fault or a loss that Lamar, yes, contributed to in part, but it was clearly not all on him and he was not the main problem, but everybody acts like he is. And again, for Josh, it's okay, Josh was a huge part of that problem, huge turnovers in that game. But yeah, the defense also wasn't great for Buffalo. But at the same time, James Cook fumbled the ball, right? That was a big one. And, you're hearing, honestly, I haven't really heard that much about the James Cook fumble. But when he starts bringing up all the stuff about Tennessee and that game against Tennessee, yeah, you mean the game Lamar literally was the only player on that team not named Marcus Peters, where he had 365 yards passing and 143 yards rushing because Mark Ingram and Mark Andrews were both hurt in that first interception where Lamar put it into place where Mark could get it, but Mark couldn't jump. And so the ball went into I think it was Kevin Byard who had the interception or whatever it was. Yeah, I get it. Lamar, he's had bad moments in the playoffs. I don't think anybody's trying to shy away or run away from that. I think the problem is that, when you have, and literally in real time in front of you, have these moments with CJ Stroud having the bad day at the office or, rough day for CJ Stroud. And then there's nothing like that about Josh and he's getting all this stuff and, he's getting all this stuff about his leadership and whatnot. You don't hear that about Lamar Jackson. And it's been too big of a problem. And the reason why I think is important to talk about is because with Lamar, it's not just football talk. It turns very personal very quickly with Lamar Jackson for no reason whatsoever. And that to me is the unacceptable part of it. Where, if you want to say, yeah, Lamar threw a bad pass or his turnover was a big reason the Ravens lost the game. Okay, like if that's true, then yeah, I'm not going to shy away from that. And guess what? A lot of the fan base isn't either. But at the same time, when all of a sudden it just becomes this wild narrative that starts, and that has happened more than once, that's where it becomes a massive, massive problem. So Shannon said, y'all don't want the truth. Go back and look at Tennessee. Y'all blamed everyone else. Defense, defense, defense. Buffalo game, Mark Andrews, catch the ball. What about those turnovers? Yeah, guess what? Lamar wasn't the one who decided to run the ball 6 times with his running backs in the AFC Championship game against Kansas City. That was bad. Did Lamar throw in a triple coverage with Isaiah Likely there? Yeah, he did. Did Isaiah Likely get pushed and there was pass interference? Yeah, it was. But guess what? No one talks about the pass interference part of it. Everyone just talks about how, Lamar threw an interception. But with the whole Brandon Cooks thing, which again was a weird play, 100%, everyone's saying, Josh put the ball in the perfect place and it was an interception and whatnot. Again, I get it, 2 different circumstances. But again, the referees, I think, impacted both those plays. Now, didn't come out favorably for either team in different ways, but they're being talked about as, yeah, that Lamar throw probably shouldn't throw that in triple coverage. And I said that, and I wasn't shy about saying that, but it's about the other added context to certain plays, not just that one. I'm not talking about that one. I'm just talking about other plays in particular to where these quarterbacks, like, again, I'm talking about it where Lamar and Josh should not be criticized when things are not their fault. But you see it pop up much more often with Lamar Jackson and a player makes a bad play and that's a huge reason the Ravens lost. And then all of a sudden the microscope goes on Lamar, where then with Josh Allen, yeah, Josh makes a tough play. He doesn't have a good play. And then the microscope all of a sudden, a bad player makes a bad play. That microscope fixates on that moment or that play more often than not. And again, like Shannon and Chad Johnson, they did criticize Josh. Like they did that. They said that Josh didn't play well enough. They had a big conversation about it. So it's not necessarily about them and what they didn't say about Josh. I just think the misconception is that, Ravens fans say, yeah, Lamar Jackson is the most perfect playoff quarterback ever. Lamar's not going to tell you that. Lamar understands that, in some of these big moments, he has to be better. But everybody deserves to be criticized when the criticism is fair. But it just feels like with Lamar, that criticism gets taken to a whole nother level. And, the expectation should be there when you are a star quarterback who has MVPs, by the way, right? MVPs. That's what it should be. So coming up, we'll continue talking about this conversation. We'll also dive into the Ravens head coaching situation, getting a little bit tricky. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming up on the show. First, this show is brought to you by Ultimate QB Football Legend. Hey guys, the draft picks positions are set and so many teams are looking for their franchise QB. Everyone should become a pro QB, getting drafted first overall by the Ravens. Well, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a number 1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is a number 1 QB career mode game on the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a QB career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is totally free to play, has no ads, works 100% offline, perfect for when you want to sneak in a quick game or two on the go. Just head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. We've got something special just for you guys. Use the promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB Football Legend, QB1, it's your legacy. And the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to stay locked in every moment than with PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app, where it always feels good to be right. Football season coming down to its final stretch. Now's the perfect time to close it out strong. PrizePicks makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups around player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just football action all the way through the playoffs. PrizePicks is incredibly easy to get. Pick 2 or more players and choose more or less on their projections. It makes watching games way more engaging, especially during the playoffs and the big game. And it's a great way to keep playing fantasy football even after season-long leagues are finished. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher is still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. Thanks so much for being here and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We have 5 days a week plus more of the Ravens coverage for you, even in the offseason. We're year-round, so we have you covered every single weekday. Plus, we have bonus episodes on the weekend. Again, the regular show is Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time, but we do have bonus episodes on the weekend when there are headlines. We have instant reactions after pieces of breaking news and during the year after games. Also, we have instant reactions with watch-alongs. We instantly react to every single play during games during the year. And we also have the Locked On Ravens Squad show twice a week. We'll have it tonight, actually. It's Mondays and Wednesdays, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. It's myself, Sam Njoku, former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail, chopping it all up there. Plus, if you want the everyday or club, you want to be a part of that, you can check out the link in the description below or on the Locked On website. You can go to the Locked On Ravens page and find out more about the tiers. It's extra add-on content, so weekly Q&As, text chains with me one-on-one, Discord server, ad-free episodes, the whole 9 yards. We'll continue this Lamar, Josh Allen, Shannon Sharpe conversation for a couple minutes. Then we'll get into the Ravens head coaching search a little bit more because it gotten a little tricky, but not super, super tricky, but it's something to keep an eye on. Another thing that Shannon Sharpe said is he said, quote, about Lamar and Josh, this is not a comparison. Neither one of them have championships. So what are we doing? This is not Mahomes or Brady. Neither have a championship. We told you Josh didn't play ball enough for them to win, and he cost them the game with those turnovers. And again, they are correct in saying that, right? And Lamar has had moments that have cost the Ravens, right? I'm not going to shy away or back down from that. But again, it's the way that they're talked about generally, right, in the national media, very generally. Where, again, it's not about what Shannon and Chad Johnson had to say, but there are multiple examples. And if you want one, the receipts are coming out. After the Ravens lost to the Bills in the divisional round last year, the facility, which isn't even a show anymore, but it was James Jones, Chase Daniel, Emmanuel Acho, and LaShawn McCoy. Their headline was, is the Ravens loss on Lamar? And then when the Bills lost to the Chiefs the next week, it was feel bad for Josh Allen. Right? Those are the types of things. And again, if you want to talk about Lamar's fumble last year or, the miscommunication interception, which Bateman ran a route. Lamar thought he was he was trying to lead him deep. Bateman ran to the sideline. It was a miscommunication. There's always context within things. But then Josh has that fumble where he kind of flips and turns all the way around. It reminded me of that Mark Andrews play. And the one that Josh had, it felt like the ball got knocked out more than, Mark just throwing the ball. But even still, if Lamar had a turnover like that, which, by the way, he did get spun around in that Buffalo game and that ball was returned. Well, he was fried for that. And we're not seeing it. Where even guys, and I know that there's been a lot of conversation. We've talked about Dan Orlovsky a lot here on this show. And there's nothing with Dan Orlovsky about Josh Allen and what happened in this game with him, where it's just officiating, all this different stuff. That to me is you got to call it even both ways. You have to call it even both ways. And so, again, for Ravens fans and, just for me personally, I'll speak for myself. It's never been about, let's deflect all blame from Lamar. Nothing is ever Lamar's fault. That's not how I operate. That's not how I do things. When something's Lamar's fault, we're going to call it Lamar's fault because it is. But, I am fair and just in saying that instead of nothing's Lamar's fault. And, he can do no wrong. No, that's not the case. But it feels like with Josh, he's the one that everybody's trying to push is he's the guy. It's going to be the Super Bowl this year. When he doesn't win, man, I feel so bad for Josh. And it's on the coaching or it's on the defense or it's on the refs. It doesn't feel like Lamar gets that leeway there. So, you got to call it both ways. And then now there's stuff coming out about Lamar on, more social media sites where it's become, again, personal with Lamar Jackson, where it feels like he can't escape it. It just genuinely feels like he cannot escape it, where, there was someone and, it wasn't anyone national, just a random post, but the post said that both are talented, but it comes down to likability. And, Josh has this humility and nice guy factor and Lamar doesn't come off that way. Talking about how Jalen Hurts come off that way, but no, what are we doing here? Like, again, like we're starting to talk about this. Lamar, like, is super polite. He's super respectful. Like, what has he done to not have like the nice guy meant? Like, it's just that. So that's what I'm talking about, right? Where feels like it's all about tearing down Lamar Jackson, but finding every little thing they can to prop up Josh Allen. Both these guys are awesome. Lamar and Josh are awesome. And I want them to be respected. Both of them be respected. But, if Lamar shows emotion after a loss, we had a couple bad turnovers, I want that to be reacted to the same way that Josh is. If Lamar has a bad play, then that should be criticized. If Josh has a bad play, that should be criticized and still be criticized by the national media the next day, right? Because that's what's fair. These are both superstar quarterbacks. They should be held to high standards. But it feels like Lamar gets held to like this, he's won a billion Super Bowls and all this stuff. And, he needs to be the perfect version of himself, where Josh can have those moments and be like he gets a pass. That to me, I just doesn't sit right with me. So I think both these guys are incredible. They should be respected equally in terms of, how they're talked about. And, there are things that, Josh and Lamar, there are similarities in their games, there are differences in their games. They have great moments and bad moments all the same. Some pop up, others don't in certain years, and then it's vice versa. But to me, you need to be able to have conversations about these guys. And while, again, standards always fluctuate, they're in the same realm. It just feels like Lamar's in a whole different category than these other guys. So that's that on that. But let's talk about the Ravens coaching search now, because obviously it's a big topic of conversation. We know Kevin Stefanski is now going to the Atlanta Falcons. So I know that was someone, the Ravens, there was a report over the weekend. They were trying to get him in the building in person, I guess, for a second interview by Wednesday, something Tom Pelissero reported. But the situation for Baltimore is a tad tricky now. It's not like overly crazy. And again, if the Ravens head coaching hire is already out in the playoffs, they can bring him in person. We know that. But for Baltimore, there are a lot of names that are currently in the championship games that they have virtually interviewed, or at least interviewed in the first phase of what they're doing. And they're not going to be able to bring those guys in for at least a week, as is Nathan Shieldhouse and Chris Shula in Los Angeles, Clint Kubiak in Seattle, Davis Webb and Vance Joseph in Denver. So those are all those names. And again, like, they can still go through their process, but obviously when you're looking at advancing to the next step, they would have to wait. And again, Seattle waited for Mike McDonald. That's how that happened. And then that moved along pretty quickly after that. But, you can still do other second interviews with guys if you want to. I guess it doesn't have to be in person. It does make things, I guess, a little trickier, because if you wanted to have the guy in person, you would have to wait. And then maybe like a guy like a Robert Saleh goes off the board. Maybe you wanted him, or maybe it's a Flores or McDaniel or whoever it is. So that is, or even like a Minter, that's going to be interesting. So it's a little wrinkle in the process, but they are allowed to meet, and Jess Rebeck did confirm this. They are allowed to meet with candidates during the bye week before the Super Bowl. Now, Jeff also mentioned that they may have to go to him, but they wouldn't be able to make the hire official until after the Super Bowl, and that's obvious. But to me, it's interesting because, we've talked a lot about the head coaching search and the conversations about how many different combinations there could be. Like, again, Chris Shula and Nathan Shieldhouse is like head coach, offensive coordinator is intriguing. I think that again, Vance Joseph, to me, I kind of crossed off my list, honestly, after the Bills Broncos game, because that Denver defense is not, that wasn't great. But Saleh's still intriguing, but there's going to be like added on competition here. Like, what is Tennessee going to do? There seems to be interested in Matt Nagy, which I think would be crazy for them, but that'd be good for Baltimore if Matt Nagy was hired. But maybe it is a Saleh and they really want Robert Saleh. And the Ravens are like, well, we like Saleh, but we also like, maybe it's Kubiak or maybe it's Shula or whatnot. And again, I don't know any of that, but they'd have to kind of weigh, okay, do you want to kind of rush this candidate or do you want to wait? Now, I don't think they should rush anything about this process. You'd have to be 100% certain that Saleh would be your guy. And, do you determine that in in-person interviews? There's so many wrinkles to it that could potentially happen. But to me, it's something that I don't think is like that big of a deal, but I have seen people talk about it and get super freaked out about it. So I wanted to just talk about it because I think that the Ravens will be okay. There are other ways that they can do things. They can be patient about this. I truly think they can. Again, there might be one or two more spots to get filled up before the Ravens make their decision, but make no mistake, if the Ravens wait a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, the Ravens head coaching opportunity is still going to be the best one on the market, in my opinion. So again, like Kubiak looked awesome like he's looked great. That Seahawks offense was awesome. They have been awesome. That's a guy that to me is probably, along with like McDaniel, Flores, I think Minter, Salah, like there are a lot of good options for this team that you can build great staffs around. And you also, like, there are only so many openings. There are a lot of openings this time around, but there are technically only so many. So some of these guys are probably going to not get jobs in the head coaching aspect. And they're going to have to, kind of see, okay, well, while interest is high, and they're getting interviews, they might be like, okay, I want to wait for Baltimore's job. I want to see if I'm that. And then if not, maybe they do go back. Like McDaniel, for example, he's someone that said, according to reports, that he would take a better offensive coordinator opportunity over a mid-tier head coaching opportunity. And maybe some guys are thinking like that, where they don't want to go to a specific opportunity, even though they're getting interviewed and whatnot. Maybe they want to wait for Baltimore's, and if that doesn't work out for them, well, then they're going to go back to their team and do it again because they're in a good situation already. So again, there's so much. The Ravens, I think, are done with all of their first wave of interviews. I wouldn't be shocked if we got some level of a list of, maybe it's not a full list, but we start to kind of hear some reports about second or in-person interviews over maybe today, tomorrow, the next day. I'm not sure. But it's exciting because like things are starting to get real now. You have Harbaugh in New York, Stefanski in Atlanta. Things are starting to move here. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about what the head coach that comes in, whoever it is, needs to fix, because some of those weaknesses have been very exposed in this postseason. And the Ravens, they need to be able to get to what those teams are doing in the postseason. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming up on the show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. Thanks so much for being here. If you have a friend or a family member who's a Ravens fan or wants some daily Ravens coverage, be sure to send them over here on Locked On Ravens. We're building up awesome communities, video form, audio form, social media. You can follow me over on social media, by the way, Oestreicher34, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the whole 9 yards. We're also trying the Facebook thing this year, so be sure to follow me over on Facebook at Kevin Oestreicher. But the Ravens, they've had some weaknesses be exposed this postseason, and they haven't even played in this postseason. But we're seeing what these other teams are doing. And there's one big one that a lot of people are talking about right now, and rightfully so. It's turnovers, defensive turnovers in this postseason. There've been a lot of them. There have been a lot of them. We talked about Josh Allen, CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, Drake May, even the winning quarterbacks are turning the ball over. Go Knicks. There are tons and tons and tons of forced turnovers. That is something that, unfortunately, the Ravens weren't good at. They just were not good at. Now, they got better as the year went on. But even still, they finished kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of turnover percentage at 17. But it just felt like timely turnovers weren't there. And also, playoff turnovers have been non-existent in the Lamar Jackson era. Actually, I don't know if I don't think I still have the graphic, but it's unbelievable. Oh, I do. Here it is. For those watching in video form, I'm going to read it out for those in audio form. The turnover differential and the Lamar Jackson losses in the playoff era, or the Lamar Jackson playoff losses that he has had. This is the turnover differential. 15 turnovers for the Ravens on offense, which again is not acceptable. And we can chalk that up to a lot of different players. Lamar, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, et cetera, et cetera. 2 takeaways, though, on defense in the Lamar Jackson era in losses. So that's a negative 13 turnover differential. It's not acceptable. It is not acceptable. And we've seen timely turnovers from a bunch of different defenses. Obviously, the Rams game last night, Chris Shula's defense forces multiple different turnovers. The Texans defense is insane and forces turnovers on Drake May. The Patriots defense goes crazy on CJ Stroud. The Broncos defense gets the Josh Allen turnovers, and that whole thing happens. Like, you need turnovers to win. And the Ravens it's been not great for them, both, with what we've seen the last, at least year plus, and then in the losses in the Lamar Jackson era in the postseason. And this is why, again, Lamar has had his moments in the postseason where he has struggled, and I'm not going to shy away from that. But, the defense also, they, in that Chiefs game, decided to give up a couple of early scores and then tighten up, and then do their thing, in which they did their thing. In the Bills game, it was kind of the same thing. Slow start for the defense, and Lamar had his moments, and, Mark Andrews had his, and Zay Flowers had his, but it's a team game. It's a team game. And so back to the original conversation, it's like, it doesn't feel that way when we're talking about Lamar, but with other quarterbacks, all of a sudden it's a team game, and, the quarterback is only a part of the problem, where with Lamar, it's, he's the bigger part of the problem, which is just ridiculous in my opinion. But back to the defense conversation, like, you need guys on the defense that will be able to force turnovers consistently. Like Marlon in that year, he forced all those fumbles, was awesome. And, he found his way into spots this year, but at the same time, he also was burning a lot of different plays. We talked about Marlon yesterday on our bonus episode and kind of what he had to say about his Baltimore Ravens future. But, you need pass rushers. You need it. You need guys that can get to the quarterback, force bad throws, get strip sacks on guys. Like, you need to have that elite pass rush, and Baltimore just did not have it this year. And, they've really struggled to find those like elite pass rusher guys that are top 10 in the NFL in terms of like year after year after year after year. And, hopefully Mike Green can flourish into one of those guys, but I think they need to definitely trade for somebody, because you can tell, like, all these defenses that made it to the divisional round, like, they had elite pass rushers, and even defenses that were injured and their pass rushers were injured. Like, those are the types of players you need. That's the type of move you need to make, because turnovers, it defines games. And the Ravens being such a momentum-based team, turnovers would fuel them, right? It would. And then, you saw, like, they wouldn't force turnovers early this season, and they struggled. And then they started to force some, and you're like, okay, now we're starting to work with something here. So I think that with the way that we've seen these defenses play, it is only up to the emphasis for me on getting this defense right. You have a lot of holes you got to work out on both sides of the ball, but man, they need to be a much better turnover defense next year. And obviously it's going to start with the personnel, who the next head coach is, coordinator, and the whole 9 yards. But that's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, be sure to like and subscribe button in video form, and follow along with subscribing audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Coming up, we'll have the squad show tonight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Then we'll be back here tomorrow, regularly scheduled programming. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.